You are listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets modern vitality. If you are seeking to reconnect with your innate vibrancy, you're in the right place. I'm Emily Davis, a seasoned holistic esthetician and herbalist. Join me as we unlock the secrets of ancient skincare practices, explore the beauty of seasonal and nature-based living, herbalism, and true holistic well-being for you and the broader ecosystem. This podcast is brought to you by Stratum Aesthetics. Head to stratumaesthetics.com to find curated skincare, body care, and other wellness products hand-selected by me. Now enjoy the show. Welcome in. Today's episode is a celebratory episode. I'm celebrating my 7th anniversary in this iteration of my business. I've been an esthetician for coming up on 18 years this summer, but 7 years ago, I started Stratum Aesthetics in May of 2018. So I wanted to take this opportunity and share 7 lessons from my 7th year in business. Lucky number 7. This is the 3rd year that I've done this. I'll link my reflections from year 5 and year 6. Year 5 I shared on Substack, and year 6 was an episode from the podcast last year. If you like today's episode, you might enjoy those as well. I am hoping that this episode can serve as inspiration for my fellow entrepreneurs who are listening. But even if you're not an entrepreneur, this episode is for you because it's really just like life lessons. I think being an entrepreneur is the most intense journey of self-discovery that you could ever go through. It's like you're forced to see where your fears live and where all of your avoidances hide, where your scarcity is screaming the loudest, and you're confronted with all of your control issues, your procrastination, perfectionism, all of your not enoughness, all of your shadow that you wanted to bypass. It's all showing up front and center. And the wild part is you can't just shove it down and keep going because your business is not going to grow beyond the parts that you're unwilling to look at. And what's frustrating is that you can want something so bad. You can see it, you can taste it, feel it in your bones, but the only person standing between you and that very next level is you. You're the one with your back up against the wall, the one who has to look at your fear of being seen or your weird relationship with money, your addiction to chaos, imposter syndrome, whatever it is. Unfortunately, no one's coming to save you. You have to clear out all of the gunk, make the shift, decide to become the version of you who can actually hold what you're asking for. And it's maddening because wanting it isn't enough. And I think before I became an entrepreneur, I did think that wanting it was enough, but you have to become the person who can actually carry that. And at the same time, I will say it is all worth it because facing all of those shadows has changed me, and I have gotten to feel so proud of myself and what I've created and moved through. And I saw this reel on Instagram the other day that was like, building a business is hard. And then under it, it said, sure, but there's no way I'm letting another adult tell me when I'm eating lunch for the next 30 years. And I was like, hell yeah, doing my life on my terms is truly the only way that I personally want to do it. And I'm obsessed with the idea of being the architect of my life. Like, yes, building a business is hard, but it's also this incredible invitation to step into full creative power. We have these wild, untapped superpowers that I didn't know about really until my 30s. And I worry that some people never tap into these superpowers to imagine and shift and design a life that reflects who we really are. I feel like a lot of people don't know that they can truly design their life. They can be in the driver's seat to design a life that is your own heaven on earth. And I'm so grateful that I get to wake up every day and build something that reflects who I am, my values, what I believe in, how I want to feel. I do feel very passionate about business ownership. It comes with a lot of muck to work through and lessons to learn. There's always learning moments happening. And so I wanted to share some of the greatest learning moments that I've had over the past year. And I want this episode to just be kind of like a spoken out loud diary entry. And my hope is that the lessons that I've learned can be of some value to you, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. So let's get into the first lesson. Lesson number 1 is I can't do it all alone. And even if I can, I shouldn't. This is a lesson I'm kind of in the middle of learning. I've had this internal badge of honor that I have done every single thing in my business on my own. I've truly created so much out of thin air. I built it from the ground up. I built my website. I cultivated a book of in-person clients to the point of being booked out more than 6 months in advance last year and turning people away, all without paid marketing. It all came from building an Instagram community and word of mouth. I built this podcast, which just surpassed 15,000 downloads last month. Again, recording, editing, producing it all on my own, while also running a thriving in-person business and an e-commerce business. Like, I have proven to myself that I am highly capable. I'm resourceful. I'm smart. I'm creative. I've taught myself the tech. I've handled the marketing. I've ran the numbers, juggled the clients, formulated ideas. I've made it all work. And I'm really proud of myself. And whenever I get afraid of the rug being pulled out from beneath me or everything that I've built somehow going away, I think about that stuff and I remember that I actually don't have to worry because I have proven to myself how capable I really am. But over the last several months, I've realized that just because you can do it all doesn't mean that you should. And capability does not equal sustainability. And what I've done has actually hindered growth. So I've brought someone on to help me run e-commerce. I'm thinking about bringing on some help for marketing and social media and working on releasing the internalized pressure to do it all with no support, with no rest and no margin for error, which I've also realized I've become quite addicted to. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, having to go in and be like, okay, why is my self-worth so tied to this pressure and to this hustle? And so that's been a huge lesson, and actually just being like, I can relinquish some control. Not everyone's going to do everything exactly like me, and that's okay. And so you're really fresh into this. This is like within the last month. This has been a lesson that has been coming to me. So that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is creating from authenticity is more powerful than chasing an algorithm. So on the note of Instagram and marketing, I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram. On one hand, it has played a huge role in building my clientele. Most of my clients have found me on Instagram or met me through a friend who found me on Instagram. And at this point in my business, most of my income comes from my in-person work with clients who are receiving holistic facial massage, centered facials. So I'm grateful to the platform for that. I have met a lot of amazing people there. I found some great and cool content and products that I enjoy. I've discovered some of my favorite podcasts because of Instagram. But I also hate the way it makes me feel sometimes. I hate the addiction that it creates. I hate the consumer culture that it promotes. I hate the way that sharing my work has often felt like a puppy mill for my creativity. And I've taken long stretches away from the platform because of all of this. I've dabbled in TikTok a little bit. That just doesn't feel authentic to me to share on there a ton at this point in time. So the lesson that I'm working on through this is just to truly create from authenticity as a way to express what's on my heart. My Instagram, I used to feel like was like this living piece of art where I would go and just express myself and not get caught up in playing the game. And so I'm trying to find my way back to that, trying to truly trust that authenticity is magnetic and that the right people will find my work. Lesson number 3 is that boundaries are protection for my energy. Setting boundaries was my theme of the year for 2025. So boundaries, but not walls. And this has always been hard for me. I'm in the past have been a major people pleaser. Boundaries have felt like, oh, I have to be bristly and I don't want to do that because people won't like me or I won't be a good esthetician. But for me this year, boundaries have come from lived experience, I guess. So from getting to the point where I was like, okay, what I'm doing right now is draining me. Something's got to change. And so I didn't sit down and create like a list of rules. I really just worked on feeling my way into boundaries, usually after a moment of major frustration or burnout, or even just realizing that I'm carrying way too much emotional labor. And that, like I said, was very new for me this year. I used to think that setting a boundary had to be like super firm, mean. I had to build up a wall or like armor myself to protect myself. But this year I just started working on holding boundaries with compassion. So I want to show up for my clients and my community with kindness, but not at the expense of my own peace or my time. So I've been experimenting with what I now think of as like a soft strength. So working on being clear with boundaries, but not cold towards people, and being maybe more direct, but not necessarily defensive, which was kind of like the default mode when I felt like I was trying to set boundaries before this year, was being very defensive about it. So I've been practicing not over explaining and not overly apologizing, but just calmly holding my line and letting it be enough. And so this certainly is not a perfect process. It's still very hard, but I'm learning to sit with myself in discomfort instead of immediately folding to people pleasing. But we're about 5 months into the year. And, you know, when you're working with other people in close proximity, especially in my line of business as an esthetician who has like appointments scheduled all day long, and I need to make sure I have boundaries around those appointments that have been, that time basically that has been claimed. So we're working on it. That's where we are. Lesson number 4 is simplicity is my strategy. So I've shared on here before, I guess, like a mantra that I like to come back to, which is simplicity is luxury. And this really anchored in for me this year. Simplicity and clarity have been so closely tied for me. I've found that simplicity leads to clarity, and the more clear I get, the more I'm drawn to simplicity. And I'm a Gemini and a manifesting generator in human design. And so I have a double espresso shot of creative energy, which is amazing. And I'm so grateful for it. I feel like it's so fun. But it can also be hugely problematic if I try to act on every idea that I get. I think it was at the end of 2023, I read this book, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by McKeown. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read. I read a lot, and that one was definitely in like the top 10. The book is about getting radically clear on what's essential so you can stop pouring your energy into everything else, the non-essential items. And one of the ideas in the book is that if you don't consciously prioritize your life, someone else will. Meaning, if we don't consciously choose what gets our time, our attention, our energy, then the algorithm will, or your inbox will, or people-pleasing tendencies will. And the central theme is less but better. So doing less, but doing whatever you prioritize exceptionally well. And so that's kind of an interesting dichotomy because I also do strive to be a generalist, especially in this age of AI, but not in like a chaotic, scattered way. I want to be very strategic about what I do with my magic. So what I mean by that is a generalist is someone who has a wide range of skills, interests. They're not just an expert in one thing. They're adaptable or multi-passionate and able to make connections across different fields. So I love to teach. I love skincare. I love herbalism. I want to bring all of these things together in more of a generalist way. But being a generalist can also get really messy really fast if there's no structure or direction. I know this firsthand. And that's where I've had to do a lot of personal work this year. I used to feel like I needed to do everything, every idea, all at once, all the time, which has led to some burnout and maybe scattered messaging and a feeling I've had that I'm always chasing something. I'm never just like satisfied where I am. And so this year I've really worked on sharpening my focus, choosing what matters most in this season and letting the rest breathe. And so I have like a note in my Notion that's the idea parking lot that every time I get an idea, I put it there and that satisfies that like craving that I get to act on the idea. And it can go sit and marinate in the idea parking lot. And I go visit that from time to time and just kind of think about like, is this idea still a good idea? Do I want to still pursue it perhaps in the future? If not, I delete it. And that idea can go float on to the next person, which another book recommendation I have is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And in that book, she talks about ideas being like sentient beings and they come to the person that they want to fulfill themselves through. And if you don't take that idea and run with it, then it will move on. And I am becoming more and more comfortable with that idea moving on to the next person. And that looks like saying no to things that are not essential, which is why I really only do facials in my treatment room anymore. I used to do spray tanning and lashes and brows and all the things. And I've really honed in. That was before this year, but I honed in on just facials. That's what's essential to me. That's what I love. That's what lights up my soul. I've scaled back on my digital offerings and said no to programs that I was hosting because they weren't feeling aligned. It was feeling like too much. I have refined the products that I offer in my online shop and have had to become much more intentional about the products I decide to bring on because that can turn into complete chaos really quickly. So although I have multiple threads, I'm really trying to just hone in on what's important and say no to the rest, which leads us into lesson number 5, which is if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. I like to say yes to everything, collaborations, invitations, opportunities, all of that. But I have started to realize that just because something sounds really good doesn't mean that it's aligned. And a lot of my burnout has come from saying yes to things that were maybe like more meh, just because I was flattered. And so working on just like listening to my intuition, Does this light me up from the inside? Is this a hell yes? And if it's not, saying no, even if somebody else is excited about it, even if it makes me feel a little bit guilty, I've stopped saying yes out of fear of missing out, because I also know that opportunities are always going to come my way. Living in that true abundance, knowing that I don't actually have to say yes to all of the things. And this shift has created so much more space. It's given me more energy. It's helped me refine my clarity. And I really like the feeling of choosing from alignment and not from pressure. Lesson number 6 is about reclaiming my power to choose my internal world. And this comes from a book that I read for the first time in October of 2024 that's been percolating ever since. And that book was called Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life by Bob Proctor. And the core message that just cracked something open for me was that your inner world creates your outer reality, not the other way around. And I think this is so important at this point in time. The outside world can be collapsing and you can still be thriving because of your paradigm, your internal reality. It's going to trump everything else. So your paradigm is the unconscious programming that's running your life. It's your default setting, your beliefs, your patterns, basically that lens that you're looking at the world through. And your paradigm includes all of the automatic stories that you've picked up about money, success, your self-worth, how hard you have to work, what's possible for you, where you're safe being seen, all of that stuff. And most of us don't actually know that we're living inside of a paradigm. It's just like the way things are. But in reality, the way that things are is the way that you've been trained to think. So most habits we have, how we respond to stress, how we spend money, how we talk to ourselves, are all created by our paradigm. They're not conscious. They're all part of our subconscious. They're patterns that we repeat because we believe certain things to be true, even if we've never said them out loud. So some examples of paradigms are like, success only comes through struggle, or my body is working against me. I can't trust my body. Rest is lazy. And there's never enough for me. Wealthy people are greedy. So these are just some things that may be running on a loop. And once you start becoming aware of that loop or that paradigm, the question then becomes, how do I change this? I think the problem for me in the past that changed when I read this book was I expected the belief to just disappear once I noticed it. But a paradigm is like a deep groove in your nervous system. It's been reinforced over and over and over again throughout your life, through your thoughts and your emotions and your actions. There's this repetition happening. So to change the paradigm, you have to actually create a new groove, which means new thoughts, new habits, and you have to repeat them enough that they start to feel more true than the old ones. So in the book, the way that you change your paradigm is to first identify the paradigm, notice the loop that's happening over and over again. And then once you become aware of it, you have to actually make the decision to change. Once you've made the decision, you have to use repetition and emotion to work through these deep subconscious grooves. So he recommends using affirmations and visualization. He's really into like writing goals in the present tense, and there has to be that emotion and belief behind it. So you can't write an affirmation and expect for it to make a difference if you don't actually believe it. And then the final step is to act in alignment with the new paradigm. So you're supposed to behave like the version of you who already lives in this new paradigm, taking aligned action. So if your new belief is I am abundant, but your actions are driven by fear or scarcity, it's not actually going to make any change in your life. The repetition of these new aligned beliefs and aligned action behind the belief is what creates new neural pathways. So for example, I had a paradigm that I'm not good with money. And it's this belief that I've held my entire adult life. And this year, I did so much work to shift that. I started doing a money date with myself every morning, just recording what came in and out, saying blessings and affirmations over my bank account, which were ones that I actually believed. Because when you're saying things that aren't true, like your body doesn't actually believe them and it just feels like a lie. And so I would say things like the money that goes out always comes back in, which is true. I can see that right in front of me. And then pairing that with habits and aligned action. And I honestly can say that I have a completely different viewpoint and mindset about money than I did 1 year ago. And I've been doing this kind of work for over 10 years. And I think, like I said before, a lot of the books and content that I was exposed to were just like, change the way you think about it and it'll change, but that's not actually true. Aligned action is so incredibly important, changing your subconscious. I also am a part of this program called To Be Magnetic, which is all about changing your subconscious patterning. And so this year was like, no, there are grooves that you need to repeatedly choose to change your habits in order to change your paradigm, which leads us to the last lesson that I want to share from this year, which is that number 7, discipline is freedom. And the phrase discipline is freedom comes from Jocko Willink, who is a retired Navy SEAL. And I feel like I've heard this before, and I think it can be internalized as this hyper-masculine, push harder, outgrind everyone kind of mentality. But I actually don't feel like it needs to feel like punishment. And especially through the lens of Ayurveda and your Dharma, I've really started to see discipline completely differently than this like outgrind mentality. So your Dharma is your soul's path. It's your unique purpose. It's the role that only you can fulfill in this life. And your daily habits aren't just about wellness routines or self-optimization. They're actually acts of devotion to your Dharma. They're how you show up with integrity with the life that you're here to live, that you're put on this planet to live. So discipline this year has become a lot less about force and more about alignment and creating structure so that I can live out my purpose with clarity and with resilience. And what drew me into my interest in Ayurveda this past year was the daily rituals. This is a big part of Ayurvedic living. So waking up before the sunrise, because this is the time when you're most spiritually clear, and then having a moment of prayer or breath to connect with yourself or with spirit before plunging into the day. Scraping your tongue to remove the buildup of ama or toxins from the night before and to observe what's going on with your body and your digestion. There's like this whole list of things. And another book that I've been reading is called The 4 Desires by Rob Stryker. And this book, I feel like, also dives into this idea that discipline is how you honor your Dharma. This book essentially argues that you're not just here to survive, you're here to fulfill your soul level purpose. And late last summer, I joined a program from my friend Margaret James, who was actually the one who recommended that book to me. And it was all about habits. And I joined because she had mentioned something in her marketing about like, if you want to fulfill your purpose, habits are really important. And she said it so much more beautifully than that. I can't remember exactly how she put it, but I didn't really get it. I wanted to support her, and I just got this ping that I was following to join the program. And I joined thinking like, my habits are perfect. This is just going to be a fun thing to do. And I was humbled pretty quickly. I found that intellectually I knew about good habits, but I wasn't embodying them consistently. And that program changed my life. I was so obsessed with it. And I found that caring for your body and your surroundings like they are something sacred reduces scatteredness. It allows you to be of service and leadership in the world, and the daily habits are the anchors for that. And so aside from the Dharma, creating discipline just makes things so much easier, and this is what creates freedom. I've been doing this anti-chaos challenge with myself where I do as many things the day before to reduce forcing chaos in my life. And this has created great freedom, so much time freedom. Discipline with your money creates freedom. Discipline with your health creates freedom. And I just think it's a lovely sentiment and something that rings very true for me in many different areas of my life. So as we reach the halfway point of this year, I want to leave you with a gentle challenge, an invitation to reflect, asking yourself what you've learned so far this year, what patterns you've outgrown, what habits are actually supporting the life that you want to live. I would love to hear from you. Send me an email. Tell me what you think. If you have enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to share it with a friend. Please rate and review and subscribe to the show. And then join me next week where I will be back for another episode. Until then, be well. You've been listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality. If you like what you heard today, consider giving me a 5-star rating. It helps other people just like you to find the show. You can shop products and find all of my offerings on my website, stratumaesthetics.com, and follow me on my social channels @stratumaesthetics.